Hi, everyone. John Michael Coppola here, and welcome to the Chicago Theater Makers Podcast, where we chat with the actors, directors, choreographers, designers, and producers shaping the Chicagoland area's one-of-a-kind theater scene. We're so excited that you're here with us today, but before we get started, I just want to remind you to please like, subscribe to, and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues who you think would appreciate the conversations we're having. We'd be so grateful to have your support in this way so that we can continue to bring these stories for years to come. Thanks again for being here, and now, curtain up on today's episode. Today's guest is a founding ensemble member of the regional Tony Award-winning Lookingglass Theater Company, where he has worked as an actor, director, adapter, and educator. As an actor, he has appeared in nearly 30 productions for Lookingglass, including 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Cascabel with Rick Bayless, Big Lake, Big City, directed by David Schwimmer, and he received a Joseph Jefferson Award Nomination for his solo performance in For Keeps and a Single Day. He also lays claim as being the only actor to perform 3 out of 4 roles in Lookingglass Alice, the company's iconic take on the classic Lewis Carroll tale. He's also been seen at the Goodman Theater, Steppenwolf Theater, Court Theater, and Northlight Theaters. A dedicated theater educator for most of his adult life, he has worked with organizations such as Eileen Boevers Performing Arts Workshop, Piven Theatre Workshop, and as an adjunct faculty member in the departments of theater at Northwestern University and the University of Illinois at Chicago, and as a teaching artist for Lookingglass, has worked in schools all over Chicago for more than 25 years. His newest project is a nonprofit venture called the Platform Center, which you'll hear much more about in our episode. I hope you enjoy my conversation with my good friend, Thom Cox. Now let's go to the top of the show. Hi there, Thom. How you doing?
Good. How are you, John?
I'm well. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so honored to have you here.
No problem. I'm happy to be here.
So, as we are a Chicago Theater Makers podcast,
Yep.
I start these off all the same way with all my guests, and that is to ask you to tell our listeners a little bit about your background, a little bit about your training, and most importantly, what your first theater experience was.
Yeah. Okay. The first, now it's a little convoluted, but the very first theatrical experience that I had was doing a 3rd grade play at Marlatt Elementary School in Manhattan, Kansas, as the Cowardly Lion in some off-brand version of The Wizard of Oz. I don't even remember. I had the costume that my mother made me with the full, mane and everything for years after that, even though I could no longer fit into it. It just was like an artifact that I wanted to hold on to.
Sure.
Oddly enough, that didn't turn into me deciding I wanted to be a theater professional. It was just sort of a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
But then, and I think it was partly because it was an elementary school production. It was sort of like, fun, something to do.
Yeah.
But then I did a faculty member of the philosophy department at Kansas State University, where my father was a professor in biochemistry, approached my parents because he was directing The Dark at the Top of the Stairs by William Inge at the Manhattan Civic Theater. Mm-hmm. And there's a 10-year-old child a 10-year-old boy in that play who is basically the fictional stand-in for William Inge himself. It's a sort of a remembrance of him growing up in his, southeastern Kansas, northeastern Oklahoma when he was a child. So I got sort of headhunted because this professor went to my parents and said, I know you have kids. And I know you have one that's about the right age. Can you send him down? And apparently, I actually just got this story not too long ago from that guy himself, Jim Hamilton, saying that my father was sort of, yeah, sure, I suppose. Yeah, why not? And my mom was apparently, what he said was, yes, it's fine with me, but you have to go through Joni, my mom.
Mom has the final say.
And Jim said, she said yes, as long as she was allowed to attend every rehearsal. And this terrified Jim. He was so intimidated by my mom, which, nobody really can know this, but my mom was the most not imposing, scary person that I can imagine. She was just joyful and all this kind of thing. But I could imagine if she turned it on him, it could be very much like, what's happening?
So this was not a feeling of many people that she was intimidating. She just.
I don't think so. I think it was just I don't really want to use the Sarah Palin phrase, but the Mama Grizzly, the taking care of her children, and particularly her youngest.
Sure.
My older brothers one of them was an athlete and jock, and the other was a super intelligent science computer nerd. And I was the creative one all the way around. And this seemed like a good thing, but I think she looked at it and went, this one is mine. The other two are Dad. So I'm going to be very careful and protect this guy. And also, I know that, entertainment can be a place where borders are fuzzy and, conceivably something could happen that would be not very good.
Sure.
So I think she was being very protective, but she also saw that everything was fine. And I don't think she attended every single rehearsal. I think she just wanted to put the fear of God in him for the first little while.
Sure.
But so I did that show, and I discovered that I had a knack for learning lines. And I had an enormous joy at just looking around at all of the people. And I think it's very significant that all of those people were at youngest young adults, college age. And the oldest were parents of my colleagues in my cohort, or even older. So it was like, wow, this is real. This is a play. And started doing plays at that point and just loved it and immediately immersed myself in everything that I could do. So from there, I went on to do multiple other productions at the Manhattan Civic Theater.
And you were 10?
I started when I was 10. Yeah.
Okay. And
from then until through high school, we had a great program of doing musicals in the park called a group called Arts in the Park. And they would do the children's musical every year. My first musical there was Babes in Toyland. And I did Godspell and things like that. And I did a bunch of things in high school. So that show really was the moment. Dark at the Top of the Stairs was really the moment that said, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I want to be. And it was quite firm. I never really questioned it after that. I was never like, I want to be a fireman. I want to be an astronaut. I was not any of those things. Once I decided on being an actor, that was it.
That's incredible. I sort of waffled when I was in high school. I had been doing it non-professionally, community theater, since I was about 6. I did all the high school musicals. Well, my brother and I actually did musicals at a Catholic high school across town because they had a formidable extracurricular musical theater program. Our high school didn't have so much. So, but then like summers would roll around and I'd join like the softball team at the Park District, and then a musical would pop up. I'd say, oh, I want to really do the musical, and I have to decide. And I always chose the musical. And then I also, when I was getting towards college age, I thought, well, I really like doing this, but how practical is that? And I like to cook. Maybe I'll become a chef, or I like to work with my hands. And my grandfather was an auto mechanic, and I'd help him with little projects now and again. Maybe I'll be an auto mechanic. So I always had this little bit of, conflict internally. Yeah. But in the end, of course, we know that theater.
It always, once you've got it, once it's in your system, you're screwed.
That's very blunt, but very honest, I must say.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
You were born, you said Manhattan, Kansas?
I was actually born in Austin, Texas, and spent the first few years in Texas, 1 year in Charlottesville, Virginia. Oh. This is the life of the academic. It's gotcha. More long-term than a military family, but less long-term than people who are born and bred and generations in the ground type thing.
Got it.
So my dad was at University of Texas when my brother and I were born, and then we moved to Kansas when my dad got the head of the Department of Biochemistry, and lived there from what would have been first grade became second grade through high school, graduating high school.
Gotcha.
So that's where I grew up. That's what I consider my hometown.
And then did you study theater in college? Where did you go?
Yes, the summer before my senior year of high school, I was encouraged by a theatrical matron on the faculty at the theater department at Kansas State University to go out for an apprenticeship at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, their summer rep theater, which was at the time called Missouri Rep, which is now Kansas City Rep.
Mm.
And I did an audition tape, went to Kansas City, did an audition there. They said yes. I was 16 at the time, and did a whole summer living with some family friends in Kansas City, but basically being on my own, doing this apprenticeship, and got to meet professional theater people and all that kind of thing. And that, I think, was a big boost in getting me into a number of different possible programs.
Sure.
And I got accepted to these various programs, Carnegie Mellon, UC Boulder, Cal Arts, I think. And each one of them, Dad would be like, well, we'll see. And then we got the packet from Northwestern, and it said, here's your financial aid. And Dad went, I can afford that. And that was the decision, you know. And
yeah.
Ultimately, it's it's one of those, I'm not fatalistic. I don't believe in destiny, really, but things worked out in such an extraordinary way, because if I hadn't gone to Northwestern, I wouldn't have met up with the cohort that I did,
yeah,
which was the cohort that ended up founding Lookingglass Theater. So, and then Lookingglass Theater was how I met my wife. So, like, you know, I mean, the dominoes of what my life would be were completely different, would have been, than what happened. So I am eternally grateful to whatever ended up happening. And I actually credit that particular matron for sending me off to Missouri Rep and giving me that opportunity, because I think Northwestern went, yes, we'll do that.
Yeah.
So I ended up at Northwestern, and that's what brought me to Chicagoland, and I've lived here basically ever since.
Wow, I love that story. I'm not going to go into how I met my wife, but it was under similar. My circumstances were a bit more convoluted about, I was doing a show. She was not in the first version of the show. Then when the show remounted, she was brought into that version, how I got brought back into that second run of the show. So I'm not going to get into it here. It's a little too long, but I love the stories where the universe sort of just takes care of you along the way.
It puts you into the place you need to be.
Yes. And as you said, the dominoes just fall into place. And, you know, we're married now 25 years.
Again, because I don't believe in destiny and fatalism. If I had gone somewhere else, different dominoes would have fallen. And would it have been different, better, you know, whatever? I have no idea. Right. But I'm really happy with the way it all turned out.
As am I. Given your background and your training, Northwestern, and all these, the internships, etc., give us an idea about character development, some of your actor's toolbox type of things that young listeners of our podcast might be able to latch onto.
Well, at Northwestern, I studied a very much, it was they have, it's not so much this way anymore, but they have multiple theater or acting teachers. Mm-hmm. And the way it used to be, you would join one particular acting teacher's class, and you would be with that class for the following 3 years.
Oh. So
freshman year, you didn't have an acting class. Sophomore year, you joined an acting class with one particular teacher. And all of those people in that class, which would, there'd be attrition, things like that, but the core of that class would be the same people that you were working with and the same teacher you were working with sophomore, junior, senior years. So I don't want to say that it was this style or model or class or school of thought as far as acting was concerned, other than it was David Downs teaching me, and his focus tended to be on things like Chekhov, like character discovery, like, very much in the Stanislavski mode. There were other teachers who were much more interested in going with the Meisner route. And I literally was like, I don't know what that is when we got out of college, because I never studied with that teacher. So, I have the sense memory and the journaling and all that kind of thing. And it was very, very useful because it was consciously digging the mud. It was consciously, let's get down there and muck about, and it's going to be messy, and it's going to be hard and it's going to be confusing, and that I really enjoyed all of that. not because it was hard or muddy or messy or whatever, but because it made you have to dig deep to understand, to really be able to go, right? Yeah. And sometimes that key would be internal, and sometimes that key would be external. And like I start doing a movement, or I start to try and embody what I'm thinking of as the character in a physical way, and that suddenly unlocks what's happening with the character throughout the play. So it's kind of a mush in my head, and I don't think of it as a school of thought or a way of acting. I think of it more as I walk into, in the same way that when you're working in an office, you don't walk in and go, oh boy, I better bone up on my Microsoft skills. Like you don't think about that stuff. You sit down at the computer and you just start doing what you're doing, right? Yeah, sure. And it's like that for me. Every single process requires its own intuition, work, whatever. Are there some basics? Yeah, I stretch, I do some vocal, that kind of thing. Yeah. But really the discovery process is largely, and I think this is what that process in college taught me, it's about who's in the room. It's about discovering the play that you're doing, not just what you're doing in that play, right, or the historical context for that play or the dramaturgy. All of those things are useful, but ultimately the story that you're telling is this group of people coming together to do this play. And that the discovery of that is what acting is for me. And there are so many different things that I find useful, from viewpoints to, yes, Meisner, to Stanislavski, to Pilabolus, all kinds of different things that all of them, I don't believe in putting things in boxes and going, well, you can't do Meisner if you're doing Stanislavski, right? I don't believe that. Sure. I believe that every single thing is going to have an application at some point in your career. And it's just a question of letting it occur to you when you're in that room.
And that's so true now that you're expressing that, because that was very much the way our production of Fiddler came together.
That's what I was thinking too.
Had a very, very specific vision for it, unlike any other version that's been out there. And from day one, you just knew this was not going to be the same that we've seen, and the energy in the room and the work to create those visual moments that she just instilled in everybody was really a remarkable piece. And
how much of it was, this is what I'm contributing versus this is the language we're speaking.
Right.
Right. We had to learn Elizabeth's language and her vocabulary. And I was familiar with some of the ideas behind that vocabulary. So I think it was easier for me to kind of lock into it than some others. Yeah. But I think everybody finally got there with like, oh, right. Yeah. And I don't know when exactly it happened for everybody, but I remember, getting to a point, it was somewhere, I think it was when we first saw the prayer, the evening prayer.
Yeah.
Over the
Sabbath prayer.
The Sabbath prayer. Yeah. That kind of encapsulated the quality of it for me. Yeah. It had the storytelling of the music and the singing. It didn't have dance, but it had gestural work that was incredibly detailed and very small and very gentle and very intimate. Yeah. But it was full. It was absolutely full. And that was the moment where I think people went, oh, right? Yeah. I have to agree. I don't know, maybe, but that definitely, I looked at that and went, that's the epitome of what she's trying to do, what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, I felt the same. Yeah. So you mentioned Lookingglass. I'd be remiss, of course, we have to touch on that. So I'm really curious about how that started. I'd love to hear what you like to call the heady heyday of the late 80s, early 90s in Chicago theater. So start from the beginning, and let's see where the conversation takes us.
Okay, so actually it's a really good segue off of the talking about my experiences in college, because of course that's where I met all of these folks. Sure. But the quality of being in the room and the people that you're working with is where you're going to discover what you're doing and how you're doing it. Yeah. The acting class was that. And we also had, for I think 5 of us, I think, of the original 8 were all in the same acting class. So it was really very much a cohort who had been together for a while. And we all were speaking somewhat the same language with different offshoots. And we spent a lot of time, several years, discovering these things together, and not necessarily all being on exactly the same page, but really all having a very large set of similar experiences.
Yeah.
There's also a big student production environment at Northwestern, the ecosystem of student producing at Northwestern. I think it's still pretty healthy. But
yeah.
At the time, it was literally like people would say, we're going to do a play. They would go find a room in a building somewhere and pretty much get somebody to say, yes, you can use that room. And we would rehearse in that room. And then in a basement of another room somewhere else on campus, we would do a production. Sometimes it was a basement. Sometimes it was the what we call Shanley Shack. It's technically Shanley Pavilion, which when we first started working there, only a couple of years before, it had been used as a storage shack for the lawnmowers for the facility, for the landscaping folks on Northwestern's campus. So it was, we were just finding spaces and doing stuff because we could. And we had an enormous amount of energy around experimentation. And so those experiences led us to produce a couple of plays, not as Lookingglass, but with the cohort that really, the core people that became Lookingglass.
Yeah.
So David Schwimmer directed Alice, which was the Alice in Wonderland, which was the Manhattan Theater Project and Andre Gregory's adaptation of Alice. And all very physical and all very ensemble. So everything was created with multiple bodies on stage, and those bodies were not necessarily characters all the time.
Right.
And it was astounding. Just knocked everybody for a loop because nobody had seen anything like that before. Really, that's at that point on campus in our generation. And then he said, "Okay, I'm doing another one next year." And he got one of those student-producing organizations, Arts Alliance, to produce The Serpent by Jean-Claude Bonatali in the Open Theater. And I was involved in that one. So it was sort of the second proto-Lookingglass Theater Company show. And we did that one. And then after that play, Schwim and the other people who had gone with Alice to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival had started talking about forming a company, and they started inviting individuals into it. And I was one of those people. Wow. And then after that, so that was February, our birthday is February 13th, 1988. That was when we had our first meeting. We weren't Lookingglass yet, but we had our first meeting as a company. And then in the spring of that year, we did a production of a show that we ended up producing again when we were professional, when we were out in the world, called West by Stephen Burkhoff, which is really challenging. It's in verse. It's in what we called Shakespeare. So it would take Cockney slang and Shakespeare phrases and mush them together.
Oh, wow.
And Shakespeare, it was the story of Beowulf retold through London gangs. It was just like all over the place and incredibly physical. So we did that, and then we graduated, and it was like, okay, let's make a show. And we went into rehearsal for a workshop for...
Hold on, I'm going to make sure I get the timeline right. So you guys were still in school when you did that?
When we did that, yes. So
Gotcha.
Summer after we graduated,
I see.
5 or 6 of the founding members were still in town. 2 of them had gone back out to LA to work.
Got it.
And we stayed and we workshopped our own adaptation of Through the Lookingglass for months and months and months, and then produced it at Shanley Pavilion on campus for 3 performances over 2 nights. And that was our first show. And actually, hang on just a second, I pulled it out.
Ooh, media.
This
is fun.
Visual aids.
Yes.
I don't know how far back I'm going to have to get.
Oh my gosh, look at that.
That's the very first poster for the first show we ever did.
Wow.
Everything DIY, completely produced.
Sure.
By ourselves, right? The set was carpet remnants that we bought for like $50 that we, stapled down to the stage for ourselves, and that was it. And the costumes were all union suits. So we just went down to the Army Navy surplus on Belmont and bought union suits.
Broadway on a budget, baby.
I know, it was fantastic. We probably produced that show for like $500, whatever. The whatever was, why can't we do that now? But and we'll get to that later.
Yes.
So that was the first show, and then shortly after that, we just started like, let's go. We're going to get a space. We're going to do something. We're going to make a theater. Blah 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 blah. And that journey was not fraught, but it was definitely like, oh, there are obstacles. Right. How
Surprise.
do we deal with that? Yeah, money. And so we tried a couple of places, and we finally ended up with this place. There was a guy named Seth Green, who at the time was probably he was a kind of a fixture on the performing arts scene, performance art scene, and sound, alternative experimental sound scene. And he was married to Martha Lavey Green, who that was her name at the time. And then they got divorced, and she eventually became Martha Lavey, who, of course, was the longtime executive artistic director of Steppenwolf. Yeah. So old friend from long ago. And he had a place that he was turning into his own personal sound design studio called Oxygen Jukebox. It was down on 13th Street and between Michigan and Indiana. And at the time, that was not a nice place. It was not nice at all. I mean, it wasn't terrible. It wasn't the ghetto or anything like that. It wasn't like there were gunshots, but it was bleak. There was just nothing down there. It was all abandoned lofts and things like that. And we opened up a theater in there because we saw the space, and it was like, yeah, you want the room next door? It's open too. So we knocked down a wall, built a double door into that. That became our theater. The room that housed the sound design studio was then also sort of empty, a little empty. And Seth invited Tony Fitzpatrick to come in with his gallery, which was called the Edge Gallery out in Villa Park. So they brought the Edge Gallery to this space. And we did all of the work to renovate the Edge Gallery and the Lookingglass Theater, literally till like 2:00 in the morning every night, then go and do the day job type thing.
Yes.
It's brutal. But we were 22, so it didn't matter. And the Edge Gallery, the Lookingglass Theater, and Oxygen Jukebox together formed what became the Edge of the Lookingglass, which was a multidisciplinary event space that did art openings and art shows, did sound design sound design projects, which were all MIDI at the time, which in 1989 was pretty cutting edge.
Yeah.
And we did plays, and we would program on the weekends when we weren't doing something. We would program on the weekends for music and performance art and readings, and we were just throwing stuff at the wall, and it was so exciting. Paula Killen was there, and the guy who did our band booking was very connected with the club scene in Chicago, music scene. So we had bands like 11th Dream Day played there, and Smashing Pumpkins before Siamese Dream.
Wow.
So Billy still had his long stringy hair, and I remember that at that time we all thought it was pretty hilarious. Wow, here's a band. They cleared the room. Like literally nobody wanted to listen to them.
Oh, wow.
I mean, just really exciting. And there was we also we did a couple of shows there. We did a one weekend run of something that we never should have been allowed to produce. Was a microphones only, oral, but performed in front of people. Oral adaptation of Still Life with Woodpecker by Tom Robbins. So all the sounds that are mentioned it was all narrative. And anytime there were sounds, we would just make the sounds, and it was like a radio show, except we were performing it live.
Huh.
And then I directed and adapted a one-person show, and we had another production of ours called Treatment that brought a couple of other people to our ensemble. And we did the second show that we had ever produced. Maybe it was the third. I think it was the second. Of One Blood, which was an original play about the civil rights murders of Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman during the summer of 1989, which I believe would have been the 25th anniversary of their deaths.
Wow.
And it was very exciting, but it was all just flying by the seat of our pants. And then in the fall, we rented the theater to New Crime Productions. Now, New Crime Productions, they were a contemporary company of us. They had started about the same time, a little earlier. And they had done a show called Alakazam or After the Dog Wars. And a couple of other people in the ensemble were like, oh, they're amazing. So we brought them in to produce a show called Methuselah. Now, the thing about New Crime, they worked in a particular style. Always, every show that they did was this particular style. They used whiteface and commedia, and they would create what they called images or archetypes or types. And you would create this out of whatever fat pads and costume rags they had on a rack, and you would create this thing. And it was intended to be a commentary about contemporary society, particularly politics. So this play was a commedia whiteface adaptation of a German expressionist play from like the 1940s, maybe? I don't remember exactly when it was from.
Okay.
And the people who had created that theater company had gotten the inspiration from the Actors Gang in LA, which was run by Tim Robbins at the time. And the folks who brought it back to Chicago were led by John Cusack and Steve Pink and Jeremy Piven and Paul Edelstein and Spoonie and all these guys who had Paul Quinn, who was Aidan Quinn's brother. These guys were all like ETHS folks who had gotten together and decided to do some stuff. And a couple of them had some, obviously Johnny had a big success. And he brought that success back to Chicago like, I'm going to draw. And they did. And it was one of the most mind-blowing things I had ever seen.
Wow.
I'd never seen anything like that before. And at the same time, I was like, I totally get this. I totally understand what they're doing and what's happening.
Yeah.
But it's very specific. It's like when you have the food, the attention of the audience, when you are the person who is speaking, you address straight out. Everybody else has their focus on you. And when you pass the food, you give a boom, quick head turn.
Okay.
And that person then has it. So it's a very, very, very specific style, and it's driven by rock drums, just loud drums throughout the entire performance, sweat flying everywhere, unbelievable. And Jeremy Piven before he was Jeremy Piven. I mean, he was always Jeremy Piven from the Piven Workshop and Byrne and Joyce's son, but he had not become Entourage Jeremy Piven yet.
Right.
So that was the kind of environment that was starting, that we really felt like we were in and was really bubbling in the late 80s and early 90s, was this very much like intermingling of communities, experimentation happening all over the place, people going, oh yeah, want to see what I can do? That kind of shit. And Karen Findlay did her performance there during the time when she was part of the NEA 5, and just so amazing, just amazing people. And that energy is what I've always wanted to bring with me into any kind of a community. Like, what are you going to bring? What's new? What's different? What's exciting? Oh, I've never seen that before. Yeah. Holy shit. Maybe I should make something different and challenge you, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
it was a fantastic, just heady heyday is exactly what it was. And then throughout the 90s, we ended up leaving it to the Lookingglass for extenuating circumstances. But throughout the 90s, we were itinerant. And that was the churning world of the 90s off-loop theater scene in Chicago. Yeah. And at the time, it was so much healthier than the downtown theater world. It was just that had all kind of fallen away. And nobody was producing in the big houses. Daley had not yet done his big, like, let's get those renovated and get touring houses back in. None of that was going on. So really the off loop was the theater scene, right? Yeah. You had Goodman, you had Steppenwolf and blah, blah, blah. But even Steppenwolf, they had they had not yet, they were just about to move to their place on Halsted, on the place that they're in now.
Yeah.
So it was very, very grungy and very storefront. And we moved from theater to theater, and so, the places where we were, the theater building, which just yesterday we saw a news item saying that it's that building has been sold to a developer that's going to turn it into a 5-story apartment building.
I did not hear that.
Yeah. That just came out yesterday. And it is. And well, it is and it isn't. And the reason it kind of isn't is because the people who took over Stage 773, which is what took over the theater building,
right,
had switched from being theatrically oriented to being event oriented. And they had made it into like escape room and immersive experiences and things like that. So it wasn't producing theater anymore, at least not the kind of theater in black box theaters that we were used to.
I see.
But we did several several shows in the theater building. And we did a lot of shows at Chicago Filmmakers, what then became Bailiwick, which has since become Theater Wit. So those two buildings were right next to each other, and we were literally just kind of like, what's going on in here? Let's do something here. And we were the first theater to use the Chicago Filmmakers as a theater. Oh. And it then blossomed and turned into, we're going to keep coming back here as often as we can. And we did maybe 4 or 5 shows there over the course of the 90s. But we also did things like at Hull House. We did things at... And then we also did things that were found spaces. We did a production of Antigone by Jean-Claude Arnaoui, and it was done actually we reconnected with Tony Fitzpatrick. We did it in an empty building, an empty room loft of what was at that time his World Tattoo Gallery down also on 13th Street in that same building, just up on the 5th floor or whatever it was. Yeah. And it was filled with windows all across. And rather than blacking them out, which is what you would think you would do in the theater, it looked, because it was right on Michigan Avenue, there was a bank of windows that looked straight out over Michigan Avenue, and there was nothing on the other side. So all you saw was the L going by, because it had just come up from the subway at Roosevelt.
Okay.
And you'd see these trains in the not too terribly far distance, and they would meet and kiss and then go their separate ways. And of course, Eurydice is Eurydice. I did say Eurydice, right?
I think you said Antigone.
The play? Yes. Eurydice is the play.
Gotcha.
And so it's a story about people missing each other.
Sure.
And the visual of that, we designed the entire production around that space, because you can't be in a space like that and be us and say, oh, let's make it into, neutral. Let's just make it this. We just loaded all of our stuff that we owned, literally everything, out of storage because we lost our storage at that point, and put it on stage for our set. And then we had this big bank of windows, and we used that for lighting and backdrop and images and all that kind of thing. And another space that we were in that was found was Mary Zimmerman directed her own adaptation of Remembrance of Things Past, really just of Swan's Way, by Marcel Proust. And she called it 11 Rooms of Proust. And she got this lofty old warehouse place on Ravenswood. And we cleaned up a number of rooms inside it, which took a lot of work. And she designed and created a show that was a promenade show. So you would start in one room, you would see a scene, and then you would promenade to another room, and you would see a different scene, and on and on and on, and you would get 11 of them. And then you would walk out of the building out the back by fire escape. And it was fascinating, right? People didn't know quite what to do with it. They loved it, but there was no curtain call because the people who were in the last scene had to run around to get back to the first room or to the next room that they were supposed to be in. Sure. For the timed entry, right?
Right.
So there was no curtain call, and the people would just go out into the alley. So they would turn around and they would applaud the building. from the alley. And that's a story that's told by Laura Eason, and I just love it so much.
My God.
But that kind of spirit of theater can happen anywhere.
Yeah.
Theater can happen in whatever space you say it's happening in.
Yeah.
Was a big, important part of our ethic, our modus operandi. And then we got a little bit older and started, and then of course we were like, we need a theater, we need a space. And Schwimmer was able to coordinate between Lois Weisberg, who walked into the old water tower pumping station, where they had this very cheesy like video presentation. Here's Chicago, or something like that. This is Chicago.
Yeah. And
you would sit down in seats and you would watch this video thing, and that was it. And it was this beautiful space that they could use, but it was not being put to the best uses. So she went, I have an idea. I'm going to create an initiative to give this room to a theater company. And I'm going to create the criteria around who's eligible for it to exactly match Lookingglass Theater Company so that we would get it. And so we've been there ever since. It cost us, $13 million, or God knows how much, $30 million, something, to renovate that space. And it was done with an enormous amount of heavy lifting.
Initially?
Yeah.
Wow. And that was 19 what?
That was, we got it in 2001, I think, and we moved into it in 2003. So 13 million in 2003.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a beautiful space.
Oh, I
don't know how many shows you've seen there, but
I've seen a couple.
The comment that I love the most about it is always when I go in, because I'm a very anonymous Lookingglass Ensemble member. People don't go, ooh, he was in, that's not me. But I get to be fly on the wall and listen to conversations when I'm sitting at audiences. And inevitably, at least one person walks into the theater and goes, oh my God, it wasn't like this the last time we were here. That was over there and the audience was over there. And it's a black box. It's a true black box.
Yeah. In
that it is completely transformable.
Right.
And the reason for that is because of our itinerancy during the 90s. We would find spaces and then design theater experiences with those spaces in mind.
Sure.
So we wanted to be able to influence what our space felt like based on what we were doing. In the same way that, we can't do that when we're itinerant. So we just look for a space that gives us what we want.
Right.
Now we're in a space where we can make it be what we want it. It's expensive to do that because it takes weeks to change it over into a new configuration.
Sure.
And the labor for that is quite expensive. But it is absolutely the right choice for us, because if we were pigeonholed into a set seating and, we're always proscenium or always thrust, it would not bode well for our creativity, I don't think.
Yeah.
So that the college influenced the experimentation in the beginning. And then the experimentation grew out into the community at large when we became itinerant, and that itinerancy guided us to a lot of the decision making that we made about what kind of theater building that we wanted to have, facility that we wanted to be working in.
Wow. And of course, I'm sure that was a large part of you guys are just sort of coming back from a bit of a hiatus in programming.
Just now?
Well, when we were last year, when we worked together, February of 2024.
Yeah.
You guys sort of just made the plan to come back. So I'm sure that a lot of sort of that history and the want to maintain that standard played into that decision, I assume.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and this is sort of where we can pick up that other thread. Like, why can't we do theater?
Right.
That, you go out and you pick up branches off, tree trimming day and hang them up and, oh, look, you have trees. It's like, why can't we go back to doing that kind of work? And part of it is that we have established an aesthetic bar, an aesthetic standard that we believe needs to be met to meet the expectations of the audience that we built over the decades, at this point.
Yeah.
I think there's a comfortable place in between, but the fact of the matter is there is no such thing as creating on a shoestring anymore. A shoestring these days is a couple $100,000. That's a shoestring budget at this point.
Wow.
Like a real budget, you're talking about between $500,000 and $1 million to produce a play. You know, not close to $1 million, but not above 500,000 for sure. It's an expensive thing to do because you have to pay people now. You know, I made that sound like, oh gosh, now we have to pay people. It's just like back in the day when we were in our 20s and getting towards our 30s, we were the labor and we wouldn't make any money, or we would make a fee or whatever. And that would be it. But we can't do that in good conscience. We cannot do that in good conscience.
Right.
And then you add on top of, we also can't ask people to wear 4 hats. We have to get people to do the job that they're doing so they can do the best job at that job.
Right.
Otherwise, you're just squeezing people dry. And that leads to burnout. That leads to bad feelings. And bad art, quite honestly. So, and then, of course, on top of that, you have material costs that have all just skyrocketed since the pandemic. And all of that stuff is contributing to a really scary crunch on the ability of theaters to produce.
Yeah.
I would love to get shows out there that are like, put a ghost light on the stage and do a fucking play. You know, I want to do that. I don't know that we can. That Lookingglass can.
Yeah. Well, this is a great segue. Then I'd like to talk about your new NFP, the Platform Center. And
I was almost setting it up for you.
Yeah, you sure did a great job with it. But you gave me some idea about what it is, but please fill our listeners in about what this new wonderful project is that you're forming.
Yeah, it's still nascent. I keep using that term. It feels like I've been in labor for months and months and months, but it's still new. It's not a thing. It's not a thing yet. Because I haven't got a space yet, because what it's going to be, the name of it is Platform Center. And it's going to be a performing arts center with 2 performance spaces, 2 rehearsal spaces, dressing rooms and support facilities for those 4 rooms, a flexible office space to be shared between companies on a WeWork type of situation. A sound and media recording studio, because the building that I'm actually looking at right now it was a light manufacturing place, and they had what they called the blasting room. So it's a big room built entirely out of concrete cinder blocks.
Oh, wow.
So it's pretty soundproof. It would be perfect. And all you got to do is just kind of put the stuff in it.
Yeah.
So I'm planning on putting a sound and media studio in there, and a cabaret, lobby, bar type of space in front. And the mission driving it is there are no longer enough, partly because of the pandemic, but we had started to decline before that. But really after the pandemic, it's just been brutal. We've lost a number of spaces to perform in. Theater companies have gone down, and they've taken spaces with them. And also rehearsal spaces, places to create, have also become, House Theater lost their beautiful facility on Irving Park before they also went down. And that was a rehearsal space that was just starting to get traction for companies that needed a rehearsal space.
Yeah.
So there's a dearth. We have a big die-off of performance and rehearsal spaces for companies to create in. And that was one of the things that really drove the exciting churning that I was talking about in the 90s. Was it seemed like you could do creation anywhere. We rehearsed in places like a church daycare room, and after hours, like 6 o'clock, we were able to show up and rehearse. And we rehearsed at a gym that I happened to be working at the time. I was like, great, the classes are done. Come on in. We'll use this big sprung floor and rehearse. That kind of thing. We would literally rehearse outside. It was that kind of feeling that you could do it anywhere doesn't really exist anymore. It doesn't feel like that anymore. It feels like you need to put yourself into a place that is within the boundaries. The city is not going to be okay with you just kind of like breaking into an old place. Right. That's it. Literally, we would do that kind of thing, but they're not going to be okay with that anymore. Yeah. And so that creates a sense of impermanency that there's no stability that we can create with.
Yeah.
And then once we do create it, where are we going to perform? The only places that have the places that off the top of my head that have multiple performance spaces are the Den, which has changed its focus to comedy and music and still does theatrical productions. But the sound bleed from the comedy and music is overwhelming in these smaller spaces that are right above that,
Sure.
that main stage. Or the Theater Wit is a beautiful space. Jeremy's a great guy, and it's fantastic the work that they produce there. But they have like 4 or 5 resident companies that eat up all that time. So there's only room for like 6 companies there during the course of a season. Viaduct was a place that was great.
Yeah.
And they went down and became Constellation, which focused on dance. And now Lynx Hall has gone. And now it's Constellation, and they're going to focus on music primarily. So we've lost all of these opportunities to just walk into a room and create because there aren't rooms to walk into anymore.
Yeah.
And so this project, the Platform Center, is to provide those spaces to new, struggling, small, and traditionally marginalized companies, because those are the companies that need it worst, that need it the most. And I want to provide the access to those spaces rent-free, completely subsidized for rehearsal, for performance, for whatever. That's my goal.
And that is
so
fantastic.
We'll see how long it takes before somebody goes, yeah, no. Nobody's actually said that out loud to me yet, but it's going to be hard, and it is going to be hard. But I think that there is, because what that makes it into, it's not a production space. It's not a space that I'm producing anything. These companies are going to produce this work. They're producing. I am merely providing the space for them to do so.
Right.
And so it is more of a service organization. It's providing a service or a commodity that companies need. And if we're ever going to have the kind of flourishing theatrical ecosystem in Chicago that feels to me like it was at its peak in the 90s, maybe that's just my own lens, because I'm an old guy. But if we're ever going to have that kind of excitement around it again, we have to provide opportunities to create and produce.
Yeah.
And if we don't, and it's quite simply facilities and resources. It's not about the ideas. It's not about the plays. It's not about the talent. We have all of those in spades. What we need are places to do it in, for people to come and see it. And that's what it's going to be. And I hope desperately that I will get some people on board that have money, check writing possibilities, whether that's individuals who are capable of donating, or whether it's foundations that can give like big initial startup foundational grants or general operating grants to continue doing the work, providing the space. Yeah. Whatever it is, I think that it's going to, as one of my consultants says, you're going to be inundated with companies that want to work with you there within year one. You're going to have your door knocked down. Okay. And I believe that if that is true, and I do believe that's true, then funding organizations are going to go, if you put it in that context of we are burgeoning, we are fostering the regrowth of the theatrical cultural landscape in Chicago, that's worthy. That's worthy of putting big bucks on so that we can get it done. So that's what it's going to be. It's come to the Platform Center.
There's always got to be that if you build it, they will come mindset.
That's what I feel. Yeah. Another one of the people I talked to said one of the best ways to get people on board, funders or consultants or whatever, is to demonstrate that you're going to do it with or without them. It's going to happen. It's a question of whether they want to get on board or whether they want to get out of the way. Yeah. And if they see that energy, they're going to be like, oh, we could get it on the ground floor with that. Right?
That's right.
Suddenly it's very attractive.
Yeah.
But if it's sort of like, I don't know, it's just because then they go, well, you're relying on us too much. Right. If you're relying on us too much, then you're not sustainable. Yeah. I'm like, no, I'm not sustainable, but you need to just keep giving me money.
Now, you mentioned this space that's got the big old what did you call it? The soundproof.
The blast room.
The blast room. So are you able to reveal where in town that might be? Or?
Yes and no. I mean, it's in Avondale.
Okay.
I will say that. Okay. It's not so much that I don't want to. I would love to.
Sure.
But the problem is I haven't actually. We've had a couple of tours of the building. The people who own it, the real estate company that owns it, is aware that we're interested in it.
Yeah.
But we're not. We haven't submitted an LOI yet. We haven't started to negotiate for a lease. And I'm just starting to work with an architect to start talking about what kinds of development can be done in there and what we want it to be.
Gotcha.
So it's still, as I say, it's nascent.
Yeah.
But it's in Avondale. Okay. And if you know the bar Chief O'Neill's Pub,
I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's very close to there.
Okay. That's all we're going to tell our listeners.
That's all I'm going to say.
They can go into town and go to Chief O'Neill's and poke around.
And I have purchased the domain of the Platform Center, all one word, and ER, not RE at the end. But I don't have a website yet. I'm still trying to get in touch with a website designer to help me build one. Somebody else was like, just go on Squarespace and put up like a thumbprint and just
or Wix. I'm a Wix guy, and it could be super easy that way. At least there's something there. Is it going to be .com or .org?
.org. Thank you.
Yes, you bet.
Yeah. theplatformcenter.org.
All right. Well, hopefully you'll have a website.
Yeah. Hopefully I'm going to have some news about it. I think the earliest that you would start to see anything really starting to come out about, hey, let's really start doing this kind of thing is early next year, early in 2026. Okay. There's a big grant that we really want to apply for, but in order to fulfill all the eligibility requirements for that application, we would have to come up with much more architectural planning than we have and demonstrate that we have financing to make it happen so that this reimbursement would be a reimbursement rather than, we're trying to pay for it ahead of time. So we're not going to meet that deadline, which is August 15th. So we're teeing up for February 15th for that one, and we can begin the project before that. But we can't complete the project before that, so
got it.
It's going to be somewhere in the next 6 months. We're going to start to get some wheels rolling, and that's when I'm going to be coming back to you and go, hey, remember when I said you needed to give money? Here you go.
Well, it's exciting stuff, and I'm honored to be sort of one of the first people to know about it, and our listeners.
Yeah.
To share
thank
with
you
our
for
listeners.
the sort of free publicity.
You bet. Before we wrap up, I do want to ask. We've got people of all stripes listening in. Just give us a little career advice you may have had over in your career, either for a life lesson or a lesson about acting or the theater or being in the business. Your choice, dealer's choice.
The biggest thing that I think I would take away from my own experiences and my own career would be communalism, collectivity. It's it goes back to what I was saying at the very beginning. It's about who's in the room, and that the ensemble is everybody who's in the room helping to create it, from designers to technicians to actors to director to music director, choreographers, audience. When you get to that place, they're all part of the ensemble, and that's something that really has been very much ingrained in me with the Lookingglass ethic. And I will. There was one thing that I always relate this story, just to go back to when we were first getting started. Our acting teacher, David Downs, said to us when we were doing shows, when we were doing West at Northwestern, you're never going to be able to work this way again. And our literal answer was, why not? And that is the attitude that I feel sort of like, why not? Why can't we do it that way? And so I feel like the answer of ensemble, collectivity, communalism, combined with the rather aggressive asking back, why not? Those two things together are sort of the biggest bundle of energy that I believe will take you through kind of any crisis, whether it's theatrical or life or whatever. And the other one is I occasionally work with this fantastic anarchist cohort called Backroom Shakespeare. And
I've heard of
they
them. Yeah.
are, you know them?
I've heard of them. I've heard of their work. I've not seen any productions of theirs, but I'm
so great. You got to keep your eye open because it's like they tell you a month ahead of time, they do it, and it's gone. It's one day. It's really fantastic. Their tagline is one serious actors, no director, one rehearsal in a bar. It's awesome.
Okay.
And so I've done 10, but more than 10 of these. And it's such a thrill. It's so exciting. But one of the lessons that I took away from it, because the idea of it being a group of anarchists, let me explain that specifically. Yeah. It is pure anarchy, meaning every single person in that room is responsible for their contribution. Okay. They determine the gender of the role that they're playing. They determine the race of the role that they're playing. They determine sexuality of the role that they're playing. They interpret their interpretation of it. All of it is their thing. So if you have a problem, it is your problem to solve. If you want to involve other people in solving the problem, then you can ask them. But ultimately, it is each person's responsibility to bring themselves into the room and take responsibility for what that means.
Wow.
Now, the thing that leads to is if someone asks you to do something, whether it is do this thing that's a favor for me as part of like, get me this prop or whatever, hand this to me when I come off stage at this moment.
Yeah.
Or whether it is we're creating a fight scene with swords in a bar that has like this much space, then what we need always is enthusiastic consent. The feeling of not, okay, or I suppose, sure, right? Yeah. But yes, that is totally what I want to do, you know?
Yeah.
That feeling of enthusiastic consent. If you cannot say to yourself, yes, wholeheartedly, then maybe you should rethink doing it. Whatever it is, whether it's a life, going down that life path, whether it's a play, whether it's, a creative project that you're mulling, whatever it is, if you're not enthusiastically consenting to what it means to do that, then think again about it. It may not be the right thing. And then, of course, the one that has always been sort of cliche amongst the theater community generally, but particularly in Chicago. Good money, good art, good people. You got to have two of three. If you only have good money, don't do it. If you only have good people, but the project is and the money's don't do it.
Yeah.
If the art is amazing, but you really don't like a couple of people in the front, or you don't trust them or whatever, then it's not worth doing.
Yeah.
But if you've got two of that tripod, it will not only be worth it to you, it will be valuable.
Yeah.
And I have lived by that. And it usually is good people and good art.
Well, with you in the Platform Center, you're going to be combining all of those mantras, the why, enthusiastic consent, and all those three, hopefully two or at least three of the three.
There we go.
For Chicagoland area.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of really good people out there, and I'm really excited to have them come into that space and go, yeah, let's do it.
Well, I can't thank you enough for being here with me on the podcast. I'm so excited that I could help get this word out to people.
Great. Yeah. Thank you.
And I'll be sure to let you know when this airs. And
awesome.
I'm going to ask you to hang on with me one more second while I just sign off.
Check the gate.
Thanks for joining us at the Chicago Theater Makers Podcast. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. The Chicago Theater Makers Podcast is a production of Spirit Art LLC, and our podcast theme music is by Paul Langford. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the podcast, please drop us a note at our website, ChiTheaterMakersPodcast.com. That's ChiTheater, makers with an S, podcast.com. We hope you enjoyed spending time with us as much as we enjoyed spending it with you, and we'll see you on the board soon.